Well, good afternoon, everybody, and happy International Women's Day. My name is Johnny Voon, and I'm head of the Sustainable Innovation Fund, Innovate UK. And you've joined the session on creating a common sustainable future as women leaders. I'm joined by four incredibly talented and diverse female leaders and founders. And before I introduce them, I just want to encourage you to add some questions in the chat. There is a Q&A box, and upvote the ones that you find most useful. You can chat to us, and if you'd like to ask us anything further afterwards, then our details can be found in the program. So today's session is really about how we create this brand new or a common sustainable future and pave the way as women leaders. And I'm joined by Roseanne Kelly, MBE, who is the CEO of Women in Business Northern Ireland, Fiona Daniel, CEO and founder of FD2I, Tabby Bunyan, founder of Reconsidered, which is one of the Innovate UK Young Innovators Award, and Sandra Steinhauer, Innovation and Growth Specialist Team Manager at Innovate UK Edge London. So I'd like to invite them all onto the stage with me, and we can begin our chat. So, welcome, and let's talk about, firstly, what does a sustainable future as a woman leader mean to you? And you can take sustainable in this sense in any way possible. So let's start with you, Tabby.
Hi everyone. Thanks Johnny for the question. So I mean, it's a huge question, and I'm not sure if I have the answer, but I think a sustainable future is going to require huge systematic and fundamental change to whatever we're doing currently. I personally am really passionate about environmental change, and I think that change has to be done by coming from the outside and doing things really differently, and I think for a very long time women have been not part of the leadership and the system sort of implementation in general. I mean, this is a huge question. It applies to all sorts of every industry, and I think that as women sometimes we come at things from a very different perspective, and we have very different sort of skill sets and ideas. And I think to build that sustainable future, the voices of women and people from diverse backgrounds need to be lifted, and so that they can come at these problems from a completely different perspective. I hope
that's interesting, Tabby. Yeah, because you coming from it from a disruptive point of view, don't you? You see it as we must change the status quo. Is that something that you think you'll always stay with, or do you think at some point when it becomes normality, that concept will have to change?
I think the idea would be that the norm and the status quo will have shifted completely, and then we'll be kind of implementing ways of continuing that stuff because it will have in mind how to be sustainable, environmentally sustainable, therefore good for planet, also ethically sustainable, so good for people involved in the industries, and then I think it will no longer be about disrupting, but the disrupting I don't think has happened enough yet. And we're still stressing the importance of getting women into leadership roles. We're still stressing the importance of even needing to address climate change. We're nowhere near having disrupted, I don't think.
Great, that's fantastic. So really powerful stuff, and we'll come to. I can see Fiona going, "Oh, maybe not." Actually, let's come to you then, Fiona. What does a sustainable future mean for you? Because obviously you're about empowerment as part of your organization.
That's right. And I actually do agree with everything that Tabby was saying. So my look was more of contemplation and thinking and what else I could add on to what Tabby had said. So I think to add on to a few things, really, a sustainable future definitely has got to be one where we don't actually have these conversations as often as we have them. And actually, to Tabby's point, it's very much around, continuing rather than, talking about the hows and why we're not where we were, where we are. And I think it's got to really be about we're just not seeing women included in lots of spaces. And I think a sustainable future has got to be one where women are included, and we're not having to keep asking all the time, saying, hey, we are here. And what really springs to mind for me when I thought about this question as Tabby was answering was, I can't remember if everybody else has seen it, but I think it was the Munich Security Conference. And there is a fantastic image of this meeting happening with all of these CEOs around a board table. And they all look the same, probably the same ages, etc. And not one woman leader present. That's not sustainable. We are making decisions that only represent a very small percentage of a much bigger and diverse population. And to not have that representation, to not have that voice included, to not have different women. So again, what we're seeing there, yes, we see different, we know there's diversity in terms of men, but we don't even see the diversity in terms of they all looked the same, like I said. So I think there's a deeper and richer aspect of a sustainable future for women at the table. We need to be very in front of mind rather than back of mind. And I think the last thing I would just say on that is around, just building on Tabby's point again, is just a sustainable future where a lot of the things that we've been doing and driving, so the empowerment of women, is just part and parcel of what we do, so that it goes from generation to generation. We can't be and shouldn't be, I won't even be around, but I don't want to be having the same conversations 50 years later that quite scarily, when we see the start of the suffragette movement, how that all started, we're still seeing very much the same things. So I don't want to be seeing that anymore. So we have to be more disruptive and really keep pushing and challenging the status quo.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because we shouldn't be raising these topics only one day a year, right?
Correct.
On International Women's Day. That's the whole point of that. So Roseanne, what about you? Because, you're in a position where you have, as part of, women innovation in Northern Ireland, women in business, there's a lot of women that look up to you for this leadership and this guidance. What's your take on this?
Thank you, Johnny, and happy International Women's Day to everybody. And again, I agree absolutely with what Tabby and Fiona were saying. Funny, I had a talk earlier this morning, and I was talking about International Women's Day, and really for me it is a bit bittersweet, because I come round to it every year, and it's fantastic to celebrate the women and there's been lots of firsts. We've our first ever head of the civil service here, first ever Lord Chief Justice is a woman. Brilliant, and it's fantastic to celebrate. But International Women's Day is also about a call to action. And if you look at all the themes down through the years, like they've been really powerful about, like, let's do it, be bold for change, progress, make it happen. And it's like you say, Johnny, and I know it's not International Women's Day anymore. It is a week, and that's fantastic too, but it stops. And the action, this call to action, doesn't actually happen. So I've been around a lot of these days. So it is bittersweet, but I think we have to keep celebrating and the women that are there. But I think we'll only get real sustainable change when we have real diversity. And I mean, a key issue is around the gender diversity piece. And we're not going to get that if we do not have men on board. This is not a woman's problem. I have sat on so many roundtables with women, and we cannot solve it on our own. And until we get the men around the table, I think it'll still be a snail's pace of change. We need our male allies to be there, but they have to be vocal and they have to be visible. And that conference you were talking about, Fiona, it was 30 white old men. And what would have been the most powerful thing there, and what would have had the most impact, is if one of them had got up off their seat and said, I'm not sitting here. But, so it got coverage because people were saying, isn't that shocking, isn't it terrible? But that would have been better to see than that picture. So that's what I think we need to be looking at. And we need to move away from, the single bottom line. We need to be looking at the triple bottom line. That includes, profits, but also society and environmental. But none of this is going to happen if we do not have men fully on board to understand that if we support women, we support everybody.
I think that's a really important point, because people talk about diversity and inclusion as a battle, and it is a battle for many people. But actually, to your point, it needs to be something that men are willing to address themselves and to battle for as well. I'll give you a bit of insight. When I was asked to host this panel, I was hesitant because I'm a man. What am I doing providing input into a International Women's Day forum? But the way it was put was that actually Women's Day is not just about having just female speakers. It's about having potentially men say, actually, there is a need to have greater representation, diversity, and inclusion, and a representation of women at leadership roles across society where influence is needed. So, Sandra, you're working heavily in the the innovation space as well too, and you must come across people like Tabby, Fiona, and Roseanne, where it's very strong female founders, CEOs, influential people. What does that sort of sustainable future mean like for you when you see examples like these we have with us?
Yeah, well, thanks, Johnny, for involving me here and for asking me. You're absolutely right. I do have the pleasure to work with a lot of inspiring women leaders. And I think the most striking, what I've seen over the past few years, and very much connected with sustainable leadership for me, is really having a vision that drives the female entrepreneur, female leader, and then also having the courage to actually implement this vision. I think, especially over the last few months and years, we have seen that outer circumstances can change quite a lot. And a lot of, the conditions will be changing around us. But having this strong vision and mission for the business seemed to be really important, having a North Star to follow. And I think a lot of the female founders that we have been supporting had this, and this was very, very impressive for us to see.
So actually on that, so you obviously Innovate UK Edge do business and innovation advisory services, right? How is the approach to innovation and leadership innovation different between men and women? Are there learnings for women and men in your capacity and your knowledge?
I think I've seen a few differences, and again, I don't want to fall into stereotypes here, but what has been quite striking when working with female entrepreneurs is that a lot of them seem to have a very strong reason for being in business, and having a very, very strong reason also for wanting to bring their innovation to the market. So it seemed a lot of them wanted to solve a real need that they might have experienced themselves or somebody very close to them. And many of them had a very powerful story behind their business, which I have to say, they very often fail to mention actually in their business plan, in their pitch, in their presentation, or at the very back end of the pitch or the business plan, which I found is usually the most important part, actually. Why are you doing what you're doing? And that was quite incredible sometimes to see with women, but not being mentioned enough.
So actually, let me just follow up on that, because I'm going to come to Roseanne, Fiona, and Tabby yourselves on this point as well too. So what you're saying then is that women are comparing themselves to men in a storytelling fashion, i.e., not bringing out their reasons and standing out. And it's a tricky situation, isn't it? Because you don't want to be, hey, listen to me just because I'm a woman, but you want to say, listen to me because I have a very compelling story that is because I am a woman, I need to tell. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it is right. And also, I feel the women we're working with tend to be quite reluctant also to tell about their successes. So I was lucky enough to have been supporting quite a few of the Women in Innovation award holders over the past years. And I'm looking forward to supporting some of those 38 that have been selected today. And many of them, I look at their pitch decks, and the fact that they have been selected to receive this award is mentioned somewhere far behind on any of the slides behind. So we're like, so really, it's not so much about wanting to impress just for that, but really stating the facts that they have been selected and they're in business for a very good reason. They want to really solve a problem.
That's a really good point. Fiona, I mean, what are your experiences when it comes to this?
So again, just listening to everything Sandra said, I think one of the reasons, maybe there's not so much reasons, but one of the reasons that's coming to mind is my experience of, particularly women entrepreneurs, is that they have come out probably of an employed role, been in a corporate space, and they haven't really been able to flourish. They haven't been able to grow as much as they wanted to, or have their potential really, do you know what I mean, tapped into. And I think, in terms of then, because of that, what happens sometimes is the environment that people are in, where there isn't given good constructive feedback, you feel that you're not being, recognized, obviously because we're not, that we're not being recognized, so we don't have ourselves validated. And if the culture and environments are like that, when you come out of that space, that's what so you feel that I shouldn't be talking about my successes, because no one's ever, no one talks about it before, so therefore that must be the norm, that I shouldn't talk about it, because when I look up and around me, nobody else does that. And if they do that, then they are seen as, a bit boastful. It probably contrasting or impacting on people's personal values, to be balancing the humbleness with, actually, I should be proud of what I've done as well. And I do think that's down to, backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, experiences. But like I said, I think it also comes from a workplace where that culture and environment isn't there, that really does embrace that entrepreneurial spirit, that then pushes people to then be an entrepreneur outside of that space. If it's not there, you then have that self-doubt sometimes and think, I'll just put it on I won't mention it. So, I put it last, but actually sometimes we should be putting it first. So that's my take on that, and some of the probably the reasonings.
So Tabby, actually then, given that, you are a new startup founder, just recent, do you talk about yourself? Do you showcase your successes, the fact you're an innovation and Young Innovators Award, Women Innovation Award, that you have this new startup that is focusing on key topics such as environmental sustainability?
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing Fiona and Sandra mention sort of their experience with women who are becoming, who are now entrepreneurs and like starting that journey. Because it's very new for me. I'm right at the beginning of my journey, and I never expected to be an entrepreneur. I didn't have any people that I looked up to like 2 years ago who were entrepreneurs. I was on a very different idea of what I wanted to do in the future. And something I've really struggled with is even calling myself a founder, calling myself an entrepreneur. My business is in upcycling, and so I like to call myself a sewer. I cannot get to grips with calling myself that. I hardly ever mention the award, and if I do, I say it's because the reason I can do the job I'm doing right now is because I was given this opportunity. And I find it really hard to just, sort of really come up and speak about it. And I also think imposter syndrome has a massive thing to do with that. I also think for me, it's luck that's got me here. And I know that's not true, but those are the sorts of like things that go through my brain and the way that I speak about it. And people, I have this conversation a lot with people, and my mentor who was with me in the Young Innovators Award, Caroline, who I spoke about with Sandra earlier, we do this thing where like every 2 weeks she says, send me the achievements you've done. Let's remember those achievements every 2 weeks, because sometimes I'd get on those calls and she'd go, so what have you done this week? And I'd go, oh, well, like not really as far as I thought I'd be. And then suddenly, we'd sort of pull out the things that I'd done. And then by the end of the conversation, it was like, oh my God, wow. I don't know if that's a female trait, and it might be stereotyping, but at least my role models weren't talking about how proud they were of the achievements they'd made, and maybe that had an impact on then the way I think I should act.
So let's actually, so Roseanne, because you've been smiling throughout this, going almost like I've heard this time and time again. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I don't know, maybe I'm getting old and cynical, But I think I have heard so many times about women lacking confidence, or they lack this and they lack that. Well, as far as I'm concerned, we don't lack anything. And, you know, it's always about fix the women. The women need to be trained in this because they don't do that right, or they need training in this because they don't do that right. We're different. And I think we should celebrate the differences and not try to fix women and not talk about what we lack. I think people who are engaged with female entrepreneurs in particular, they need some training to understand how you deal with a female entrepreneur, that the female entrepreneur is different, and they may not talk about all their achievements, or they may not ask for enough finance for their business, or, you know, all of those kind of things. So I suppose, yes, I kind of feel we need to let our women be women, and we need to sort the system out that they accommodate the brilliance that's there. And even in terms of with female entrepreneurs, even in offices, you know, you could have a woman in an office who is absolutely brilliant, but because they're not putting their hand up and they're not looking for the job, they're not brought forward. So it's up to the people who are there in the system to work with women as they are, because if we try to turn them all into the same thing, we're not going to get the diversity, which is what we all need for our economy, is that real diversity. So
let
yes,
me ask you,
be yourself always.
Okay, so great. So actually, on that bit of advice, so what's some advice, Roseanne, that you would give a new female founder like Tabby, a new female leader, versus, and also some advice for one, you know, a woman that's an established leader?
Yeah. Well, my top tip, and this is again from a number of years, is to be kind now. I think kindness, it's never a weakness, and it can only bring good. But over the years, I have met fantastic female leaders, and they worked really hard, brilliant communications, resilient, brave, strong, passionate, empathetic, but they weren't always like that. A lot of them will admit that they may have been ruthless on the way up, but they were probably harder on other people and on themselves than they needed to be. So I think what you need to do is to work smart and delegate, and find your purpose and passion, and be kind. So do it now. Keep that kindness with you, because you can get, the passion can make you sometimes driven. And with that, you lose sight of the people around you, because you're so driven with your ambitions. For an established female leader, the one, I think they need to make the changes. They're there. They need to make all of the changes that are going to attract the female leaders, or the future female leaders, into those positions. Because I think we have a lot of women in senior positions now. So this thing about, you know, if you can see it, you can be it. I think we need to be very concerned that there are a lot of women who say, I can see it and I don't want to be it. They look up there and they see that, you know, these women have worked really, really long hours. They've made huge sacrifices. Like I say, I was on another call this morning, and the Law Society are losing women in their 30s. They're just not, it's not for them. So I think for those established female leaders, they must make the changes. And that means looking at when meetings are, looking at how much travel is involved in a role, looking at maternity, looking at all of those types of things, and make the changes. If you're in that position, you have a responsibility to do that, so that when somebody looks up at you, they're not going to say, "Oh, I don't want to be you." They want to be.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point, because so Fiona, I mean, you know, a big part of your role and your business is around authenticity, right? And credibility. And as you said, Roseanne, if you don't want to be that person, if that's not who you are, what happens if being you puts you at odds with the organization that you're in? What can you do? I mean, other than leaving, what can you do in that situation?
I think it's a really tough one, because when we're talking about authenticity, you're talking about who you are as a person, what your personal values are, aren't you? Because that's what makes you your authentic self. You know, we say these phrases lightly, such as, you know, bring your whole self to work. Well, people can't bring the whole self to work because, you know, of the very same challenges, because sometimes there's a conflict between, you know, what people are feeling, what people are seeing, and what people are hearing around them, the culture and the environment, as I call it. So sometimes the easy answer is to leave, because, you know, to stay sometimes is, for some individuals, can be quite heartbreaking, quite frustrating, have an impact on their mental health in trying to change an environment where often, you know, particularly, you know, if you are different, whether that's different from a age point of view, a color point of view, a disability point of view, as women, because that intersectional lens. And if you're the only voice that's just speaking up all the time, it's hard to carry, because there's no one else that's around you that's really understanding those challenges. Back to Roseanne's point, you know, it's down to a lot of people to help to listen to those lived experiences, to understand what those challenges are and remove those barriers. But when it's just the lone voice that's seeing things, for example, you know, they might be seeing things like certain non-inclusive behaviours, people not being promoted, but wondering, why am I not being promoted? I've done everything, you know, I've been fixed and come out the washing machine. I'm still in the same situation that I'm in. And so, yes, there's things we can do in terms of speaking up, reaching out to others, to, you know, and creating that your own network and safe space. But ultimately, it is a big challenge to often be the one change in a much bigger environment when you're that lone voice and trying to fit in. So sometimes the answer, as much as I don't like saying it, is to leave. And, you know, and I do, this is a very much of a Fiona phrase, but I do say, you know, sometimes it really is about finding the right setting that you can thrive in. Don't stay somewhere that, you know, that isn't letting you grow, that isn't where you've got a conflict of your own personal values and interests.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just at this time, I want the audience, if you have any questions, please do put it in the chat, because we're happy. We'd love to hear, you know, some of your questions and thoughts as well too. I can see things coming in through the chat as well too, which is fantastic. You know, people. So Agnieszka is saying she's a lead scientist, mother of 2 great kids, and when she looks at CXOs, I want to be that person, but she doesn't feel that she wants to sacrifice her time, her family time. You know, it feels like it's a trade-off between, you know, I want the success, I look up to people, to your point, Roseanne and Fiona, but, you know, family is important to me. And, you know, as a man, I don't have that hormonal connection to family as much as a woman might do, for example, right? So any advice for Agnieszka in there, anyone, when it comes to, you know, sacrificing time versus career aspirations? Should she have to sacrifice that? Is that something?
No,
yeah. So is that something that is being pushed by men or by society rather than an individual?
No, and Johnny, I mean, you're kind of putting it down to your biology, but it's not about that. It's about your empathy and understanding of what that person is doing and how valuable they are. Like, this is a lead scientist, an asset to the company. So, you know, it's about being able to see beyond. She's a woman and she wants to be with her children. It's about being able to see that she is a real asset to this company. Her children will go to school. I want her here. I need her here. I'm going to look after her. So whatever she needs right now, I'm going to sort. So it really is about that whole trying to see beyond. It's the empathy and really understanding that, like, I mean, the amount of money that businesses are losing and because women take themselves out because of the child caring issues is astronomical. I mean, it's the amount of training that they've had, and they've been in, there's accountants, there's lawyers, there's, you know, they're all there, but then they leave. So it is huge, and it really is about systemic change and looking at what we can do to keep our assets, which are our women at the moment, in terms of the diversity of your organization.
Yeah. So Sandra, you have seen plenty of female founders as well, and innovators, incredibly talented people. Are they talking to you about having to sacrifice or future sacrifices that they might have to make?
Yes, they do, but I have to admit, the topics that we discuss with the companies that we work with in terms of delegation, letting go, growing your team, etc., seem to be equally valid for men as well that we talk. So it's I do not really only perceive this as a female startup kind of issue here. Seems a lot of the companies we work with in both directions seem to have it. Yeah, seem to have the issue. How do I delegate? How do I let control, like let loose a little bit. But I do feel, of course, that what Roseanne was just saying, in terms of, as you say, those women like Agnieszka here, lead scientists and others, they are assets for companies. And I think in terms of innovation and the growth of the UK economy, it is a big loss actually if we're losing out on this innovative potential, because as we say, innovation can come from anywhere. And I guess if you have 3 white men sitting in the same room, probably more innovation comes out of a much more mixed and diverse room. So certainly a loss here.
I think the question then probably more apt is for the organization that Agnieszka works for, that why should Agnieszka have to spend all her own personal time working when, does it mean that there are not enough resources or short staffed, right? As opposed to, why should she have to give it up? So actually, Tabby, you're young, you're a female founder, your first time startup, first time in business. What sort of biases and stereotypes have you come across? Especially, we were talking before the session about, you're looking to raise investment as well too. How has that experience been? What's the good, the bad, the ugly when it comes to what you've been doing?
Yeah, actually something interesting happened recently, and I don't know how to think about it or what my opinion is on it. But I've been told recently that I'm here at the right time, because it's really sexy to be a woman, a female founder, and sort of this weird thing where they've now labeled it that it's really trendy and cool, and I've got there at the right time, and like now sort of the VCs and the people who are investing are interested, because then they can write down, look, we've invested in this many young female founders. And like, although that was meant to make me feel good and confident about starting to apply to these things, I felt really uncomfortable about it, and I didn't want to be seen like that, or think of it as like a trend that is just for them to fill a quota, or to make it sound good. So that's probably the main thing recently that I've come across in terms of like a bias or a stereotype that's happening at the moment. And then the other thing is, when I've been trying to put together my projections for my company and figure out my plans, I tend to underestimate and underproject and worry that I'm not going to say I'm going to do that, because who knows what I'm going to do. And I constantly am getting advice from men saying, you've just got to, shoot for the stars. We invest in confidence. We invest in somebody just writing lots of big numbers. And it makes me so uncomfortable. And like sort of you all were talking about being true to yourself and, being kind and actually just doing what you want to do rather than fitting the mold of what's sort of done. It's very hard when you know that in order to achieve what you want to achieve, you probably will have to try and fit that mold somehow, and take on the advice that you're given, even though that advice seems wrong. I don't know. I'd quite like everyone's opinion on that, because that's what I'm experiencing right now.
So I think Fiona mentioned this as the intersectional lens, where we're looking at not just gender diversity, but racial and other beliefs as well too. And is how much are we? We talked about a quota of the female quota. How much of this is actually a really bad systemic problem of, we must make sure that there is a female of ethnicity, of diversity, of age, of region, of location, tick, 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 tick. We'll fund them because we need to tick the boxes, and we don't really care so much about what they do. Is that systemic now? Anyone?
It's a really tough question. I think it partly, what happens is that we react, and we react wrongly to to inclusion, basically. And we react by thinking, oh, right then, if that's what so-and-so has said, we need now to invest in more women, or more women of colour, or of this, of that. And actually, what we never do is go, well, hold on a second, why wasn't we before? So what was the problem? What's the reason why we're not challenging it? And it goes back to Roseanne's point, I think, as well, in terms of, we just need to look at and understand what those barriers are rather than reacting. Because, when I think back to on the back of George Floyd's murder, it was literally, right, we must now invest in lots of, Black businesses. We must now do this, and it was, for me, it was, yes, they're the things you should be doing anyway, but we shouldn't have to have waited till something tragic had happened for them to remember, for people to remember, oh yes, there's some Black people over there and there's some women over here. We really need to be thinking much more broadly. And I think it links back to me to that very first question, which is, how do we create this sustainability of business with this lens on? And we fundamentally need to just shake up and disrupt. I think I can sense a common theme here, but we need to just disrupt the status quo. We need to literally start to dismantle those precedent systems, but also the thinking, because fundamentally it is people that are making decisions about other people. It is people that are carrying assumptions, stereotypes, and judgments that's feeding into all the things that we're talking about here, that then fundamentally exasperates the problem, because we're never really addressing the root causes of the people that are making the decisions. What we tend to do is fix the outcome, but not the inputters to, who are making the decisions in the first place.
Yeah. Okay, so Kat's just put something very similar in the chat, and she's essentially implying that when we realize that there is I guess the pendulum has swung one way too far in terms of a lack of inclusion, diversity, organizations, policymakers, people swing massively the other way to try and compensate to have these extremes, when the reality is we should figure out why isn't there a balance in the first place. Roseanne, your thoughts?
I think, Tabby, what I would say to you is just take everything you can get. Don't worry about whether it's for women or not, because you need to grow your business and, get your voice. And, being a very successful female entrepreneur is going to be better for everybody. But the pendulum does swing. And this is to say, it could be gone from you in another while. And I have seen over the years where, yes, there's female specific support. Now there's none. It's all generic. Why do women need anything? And so it's kind of, I kind of look at it in terms of tools, if in terms of quotas being a tool, and it is a tool. We need to get more and more women, successful female entrepreneurs. If the route isn't particularly tasteful, that's unfortunate, but we need to get the women in those positions. We need to have a very diverse business community. We need to have diverse female leaders, and we're not going to get that in any nice, polite way. I think it's very like, they talk about the World War and the men going over the fence. There are sacrifices made by women ahead of us, and we're standing on the back of them, and that will continue to be the way. But I think that's the way the world works. But we just need to get more and more successful female entrepreneurs, more and more female leaders, and get that kindness and empathy around that shared with everybody. And like I say, get our male colleagues involved as well.
Can I just
so let me, because we've talked a lot about box ticking, quotas and so forth, funding or whatever it might be. And, one of the things here, especially with women in leadership, is, well, let's just get more women into leadership, and because they're female, right? And I know that we've been sort of leaning towards, actually, it should be appropriate. But to the funding point, is it almost a case, and please correct me if I'm completely way off here, that yes, okay, fine, you may have the opportunity. It's up to you as an individual to make the most of it, to prove the people that sort of did the box ticking wrong that gave you the opportunity to say, actually, I can step up to be a female leader, or even though you've given me the money to fill a quota, I can exceed your expectations and even my expectations of business. Is that a better way of looking at it, or is that still compounding the problem?
I think if I might just say, I think it's a better way looking at it if male and female founders are measured against the same criteria. I guess we still do hear that female founders get to answer different questions from investors than male founders do. So that's I think probably then a bit of more of the challenge. But if they get to be measured against the same criteria, it might help a bit. Yeah.
That's really interesting because. Yeah, it's Fiona. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and I think, it shouldn't be a case of, I don't want to be given something to tick a quota, and then I then go, right then, so because I now need to prove that I was worthy to, be given that opportunity. No one should have to feel like that. I think for me, it's about ensuring that what we do is have as much diversity, but it's the second bit, it's the inclusion. You can have lots of diversity, but if we're not in the culture or the environment where it's actually truly embraced, it's truly activated, we are truly challenging. And I think that if there's one thing that I will really want to emphasize and take away, is something that, again, that Roseanne said, and it was going just back to that image of that table. That's what we need. We don't just need men. I don't want just men or anyone just standing around, being a bystander and doing nothing. So, yeah, I'm here. I hear what you're saying. I can hear your story. What I want, exactly what Roseanne said, is when those things happen, somebody who's thinking open-minded, who's thinking inclusively, stands up and says, wait a minute, who is missing from this table? How can we make the decisions that we are making when we do not truly represent? If nobody stands up and nobody says anything, we will constantly be having the same conversations, going around the same conversation constantly. What we need is everyone. Anyway, we talk about allyship. That's what we need. And I'm not really into labels. I'm more about the behavior, the action. That's what it's about, action. Everybody, but we also need for everyone, individuals, to be able to go, actually, you know what, if someone's just giving a quota, we should be able to say, no, that's not right. Don't just give somebody a job because I tick a box. Where are those speak up people? That's what I'll be looking for.
That's great. So, okay, and we've got in the 30 seconds each of the last sort of minute and a half, 2 minutes. I'm going to go around and ask you each if you could give some words of wisdom, advice to those listening here. What to do about women in leadership. What would that be in 30 seconds? And let's start with you, Roseanne.
I think, I'll come back to the empathy and kindness. And I think if everybody, men and women alike, are able to demonstrate that and show that, we will have a much better culture in our business community. So I would really push that we look at empathy and kindness and trust as the way to go forward to sustain our economies.
I really like that. Thank you. Sandra, how about you?
Yeah, I think one piece that we have maybe not mentioned so much is, which is really always very important for me, is building strong networks and relationships. And but not only, as we said, not only between women, but also really between the different genders. And I think this could help also for, as we say, mutual understanding, but also then for more integration and not only diversity.
That's really good. Fiona.
Just to recap, I think, on what I've just said, which is to use our voices, challenge the status quo and remove the barriers. Nothing's going to change if we don't speak up and use the gift of our voice to take action.
And more than 1 week a year.
Not just on International Women's Day, but every day when you see it around.
Absolutely. And finally, Tabby.
I think challenge everybody's opinion of what something should be, and continue to challenge your own opinion on what you should be and what someone else should be, and try and keep questioning the things, because we're all susceptible to the stereotypes and the biases. So yeah, thank you so much for this really insightful conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all, and thank you very much, everyone on the webinar. I hope you found that really useful. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and speak to you all another time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.